I'm Christina, nice to meet you all. And as Heather said, so I'm from the British Science Association, which is not traditionally associated with art, as you might imagine. But we are quite keen on embracing the arts and new arts and sciences projects. So we'll talk to you a little bit really quickly about where we've come from as an association, where we're moving, and how we can hopefully fit in. So we were originally established in 1831 as the British Association for the Advancement of Science. And we were actually established sort of in contrast to the Royal Society. So the Royal Society has been around a bit longer. But at the time, the founders of our association thought the Royal Society in its previous form was a bit insular. And so the association was established specifically to try and give, look at this, to promote intercourse with people, to promote intercourse with those who cultivate science, to obtain more general attention to the objects of science. So it was sort of trying to open up science a bit more to the public, as opposed to some of the societies that were around in the day. And we've continued with this, so this was quite a while ago. Last year we launched a new vision, so still keeping with our founding vision, but updating it a bit. So we see, we'd like to envision a world where science is seen as a fundamental part of culture and society. And the best analogy that our CEO, who came up with this next vision, uses is that science is one of the rare areas where there isn't really an amateur field. So in the arts, for example, which is a great example, you've got people who are professional artists, you've got people who don't really fancy art, and you've got people all kinds of in between. You've got children who just like to draw, you've got adults who like to go to the theater. You know, there's a wide range of people who are different levels of interest and engagement in the arts. In science, it's very much you're either a professional scientist or you're not involved in science at all. And so we're working on trying to make science more just part of everyday culture and society, because it does obviously affect everyone. So we've got a number of programs that we run, and I'm not going to go into the details of all of these, but we've got some, these are sort of public, anyway, British Science Week and Science Festival, sort of large public events that we run. The Science Communication Conference is actually happening this Thursday and Friday in Manchester, and then we've got a number of education programs that we run. But we don't want to be, as part of the vision, we're trying not to be defined by the programs that we run, and instead we want to think more about the audiences that we're working with. So we had a restructure, and we now focus on teams specifically based on the audiences who they're working with. So we have an engagement team, which I'm part of, that works with public audiences, primarily adults and families, education team that works with children and educators, and the cultural development team that works with partners and stakeholders. And we're trying to really respond more to what our audiences need and things that are, making science relevant to their lives and their interests. And as part of this, we'd like to, I really need to go over my volume, sorry. I'm not used to speaking with the mic. We are sort of embracing the arts and sciences as a wonderful way of not only having science be placed in a broader spectrum of culture and society and recognized in different ways, but also reaching new people who learn differently, who are interested in different things, and having science linked into their lives. So, we've done a few things recently in the past year. We've opened for our British Science Festival, which is in Bradford this year in September. We've introduced a new award lecture specifically for the science and the arts. So someone will be giving a lecture to the audiences about that. We've worked with the V&A. We've opened up a new grant scheme for British Science Week, specifically for community groups. A number of them are art groups and theater groups who are not traditionally running science events, but are engaging audiences who we're trying to reach. So we've given small grants to groups that want to run science events, but maybe haven't done so in the past. And what I'm specifically here to talk to you about today is our sections. So we have a number of sections, which you can see here we have 16. So since the founding of the association back in the 1830s, we have groups which speakers to invite, which topics and events to run at our festival within their areas. They also advise us on larger developments in the field, and they help us promote different engagement activities for the public. And these are the current 16 sections that we have. So these are comprised of professionals that work in these areas. There are volunteers. They're spread throughout the UK. Each of the sections works differently, but they basically advise us and help with our content, because we obviously don't, we're not experts in everything. So what we would like to do is add arts and sciences to one of these, which is obviously very important. And we recognize that there's a large gap. We're not experts in the arts and sciences. We're trying to work more with partners who are experts. We're working more with artists, but it would be brilliant to have a section that is comprised of committed volunteers who can advise us and help us develop new activities and projects. So this is my last slide. So yes, help us form a new section. Some of the benefits that I just add are raising awareness. So again, your commitment to your own discipline, raising awareness of the links between the arts and sciences, and bringing new audiences and the wider public into the interest of raising their interest in the discipline. And then on a personal level, it allows you to make contacts within your field and across your field, and be exposed to new ideas and developments, again, not only in your area, but in other areas. So that's my really brief 5-minute speech. I'm really sorry that I have to run off after this, so I won't be here for the discussions, but what I'd like to come from this is basically, hopefully a few people email me that they're interested in like a little bit more information, and we can kind of get a group of people who are interested in having this take shape. Each of the sections works very differently, and it's very much based on how the volunteers work, what suits them. So hopefully a few people can get in touch, and I'll always send around follow-up emails. That's it.
Can you hear me? Does that work all right? Okay, hi. So what I wanted to do today was just take a sort of a quick snapshot of the room and the way people are thinking about environmental responsibility. So what I was going to do is introduce something which I've been using in some of the workshops I've been running, and then basically during the sort of 5-minute talk just think about the sort of resources you use when you when you're thinking about environmental responsibility and the things that might be brought up in the talk. That was mine. Is that me moving? Okay, so what I want to do is introduce the millennium. What is it? No. Okay, so tell me if that gets too annoying and I'll stop. So I was just going to introduce you to the Millennium Ecosystem Assessment, which was a big synthesis of scientific data, which was taken out in 2001 to 2005. So basically looking at the state of the ecosystems and human well-being around the time of around the millennium. And the idea of this was to produce a big document that experts could use to advise policymakers. So this is all available online. There's reams and reams and reams of it, and some very good talks that you can find on YouTube and things. Okay, so you can get all this stuff online, and I just basically wanted to. This isn't about necessarily communicating the key ideas to you today, but I'm trying to use this as a means to sort of point in the direction of some major concerns which I'd like you to consider. So, they used an ecosystem services paradigm when they did this, so I'll just explain what an ecosystem is. They defined an ecosystem as a complex of plants, animals and microorganism communities and the non-living environment interacting as a functional unit. And they defined ecosystem services as the benefits that people obtain from using ecosystems. So, is this got a point on? So things like provisioning services like food, water, shelter, things like this, regulating services, climate regulation, cultural spiritual things, educational, recreational, and supporting services, which like deep nutrient cycling and soil formation and things like this. This is really good. Okay. And they basically see how this interacts with human well-being, and human well-being they see as consisting of things like security, so your personal safety, your access to resources, basic material for a good life, things like shelter, your health, access to clean air and water and things like this, good social relations, and freedom, so your opportunity to be and do what you want or what you value. They see that humans are integral to how ecosystem services work. So the human condition, well-being interacts with ecosystem services. There's various aspects of indirect drivers and direct drivers which you can intervene in to try and have to get better human well-being or protect your ecosystem services. As we're all sort of becoming more and more aware, we're moving into a very sort of changing planet situation. Everyone's talking about the Anthropocene, so things have changed so much that sort of the things that geographers use to define different geological eras are changing so much that we're potentially entering the Anthropocene, which means that human activity has changed the world so much that we're entering an era where that is a major sort of thing. So things like species extinctions going through the roof, and all these things like CO2 emissions and stuff. So around 1950, loads of things have gone up in the past 50 years by orders of magnitude. And this is really bad news for the future because we're all going to die. And the Millennium Ecosystem Assessment itself sort of bears this out. So in the ecosystem services, as human use has increased across the board, the condition of the ecosystem services has decreased across the board. So the quality of the ability for an ecosystem to purify water and things like this has all gone down as our need for more and more water has increased with population increase and what have you. So all these major changes, the take-home messages from the ecosystem, from the assessment was, one, there's been major environmental degradation in recent history. Two, the gains in well-being and economic development have been at the cost of ecosystem degradation. And the harmful effects of ecosystem service degradation have been disproportionately borne by the poorest, and this has contributed to growing inequality and social conflict. So they also had a scenarios working group who looked at basically future scenarios. They outlined 4 visions for the future of the world. So one was this global orchestration, where you have sort of global governance, concentrating on things like focusing on trade and equitable access to goods, a lot of investment into public health and education, but a reactive approach to ecosystem management. Order from strength, which is similar to what we have today, which is very regionalised. People are mainly concerned with security, so this leads to a lot of inequality, potentially the collapse of quite a lot of ecosystems. Their favourite is the adapting mosaic, where you look at policy is focused on sort of watershed scale ecosystems, so policies towards managing these things, and as you'll see, that's sort of the utopian. This is the utopian one, this is the dystopian one. Techno-garden is probably what most, or some good transhumanist or post-humanist people probably want. So have a focus on technology, getting us out of everything, managed or engineered ecosystems. So these could be very efficient, and you get a lot of prosperity in some ways, but they're very brittle. So we probably, if you're not relying on natural ecosystems but engineered ecosystems, there's a lot of risk involved in that. So they're sort of looking at this, they're saying over the next 50 years, what would happen to various things like regulating cultural, different ecosystem services? Would they improve or degrade using these 4 different scenarios? Global orchestration, you could see that you would probably get the poor developing countries in blue, industrial countries in red. You get quite a lot more provisioning, but this is at the cost of regulating cultural things. Orders from strength, basically everything goes to pots. Adapting mosaic, there is potential to have your cake and eat it. Techo garden, these things go up, but culturally it goes down, so you're not looking at you'll lose your natural environment. So that was that. So what I was just wanted to ask you to do is basically, there's some record cards on the tables, and what I wanted people to do was just note down the sort of reference points you have in your own mind, be they books or organisations or thinkers, when you're thinking about this sort of changing environment and moving into an Anthropocene. And we'll put out the record cards at the back during the break so you can have a look, and then during the discussion maybe add to it. So yeah, hopefully that will in some way reflect what your sort of communal reaction is to this sort of dystopia, utopia scenario. Okay, thanks. Bye.
Hello everyone, can you all hear me? Yeah. Great. Thank you very much for being here this afternoon. My name's Béa and I'm a visual artist. I'm working with 4 diverse strands spanning from light, water, nature and humanity. Details are all on my website. I kind of oscillate within the dimension of figurative abstraction. As we go through the slides, if it interests you, if you could jot down your thoughts, whatever first reaction that comes to your mind, and then we could discuss it later. The slide 1 is, if you could just take a moment to have a look, and what do you see? Art historian Heinrich Wölfflin devised a method for assessing a work of art, setting clear classifications by stating that any image could either be linear or painterly, deal with flat plane or perspective recession, show absolute clarity or be relatively clear. To an extent, I agree with his methodology. The language of visual art comprises line, form, texture, color and tone. But is that really the first thought that comes to your mind when you're viewing an abstract image or an ambiguous form? Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't, but that's what I'm interested in hearing. Shape, maybe there's a shape there, maybe perhaps it isn't there. The color, do you see, is it blue? Do you all see the same shade of blue? Earlier this year, all of us had a mind torn apart by this dress on Twitter, which was clearly black and white to some people, and black and blue, and white and gold to others. Gombrich was an Austrian art historian concerned with the connection between art and science, and in his book, Art and Illusion, that came in 1960, he brought to our attention the importance of our expectations on our perceptions. That is to say that our own ideas and visual experiences that are already logged in our minds directly affect the way we as individuals view an image in a very unique way. This, Gombrich explains, is the difference between looking and seeing. And that is how your unique language speaks to you when you view a piece of art or anything else around you. And I think it would be a sacrilege not to mention John Berger, Ways of Seeing, if anyone remembers. So how does the brain process visual stimuli? And what exactly is perception? Any neuroscientists in the room? I think Christina was probably one. But this is a very basic kind of a summary of something really, really complex. Neuroscientists point to the nervous system. One theory is that our brain relies on the past memories to make a sense of what we're faced with. Brains are perceptual machines. They sift data and then try to find the best result, whatever fits. And our individual visual language is formed as such unconscious decisions. So consider this. 1/3 of brain's cortex is engaged in vision. However, the two areas in the cerebral cortex function independently of each other, and there are further 4 areas in extrastriate cortex that play in visual orientation as well. However, the scientific information that we have is limited because the neural activity has to be disrupted whilst going through MRI and recording this, and it doesn't fully help us comprehend the complexities of human perception. Perception, as we understand it, involves input from sensory data, cerebral cortex, and indirectly from the memory of our past experiences. We can even taste or feel a texture from the memory. These experiences are shaped through learning, memory, and expectation. But much of this happens outside of our conscious awareness. In other words, perception might just be an active process of hypothesis testing. Optical illusions and Rorschach's test seem to support this suggestion. In the words of Karl Marx, people can see nothing around them that is not in their own image. Everything speaks to them of themselves. Any anti-Marxists can come around later and speak to me. There is a hidden narcissist in all of us, and that narcissist determines what we see and experience. And where do our subjective opinions come from? Here, Lacan's contribution to psychoanalysis, the mirror stage. Lacan initially postulated that this was a developmental stage from infancy to 18 months of age, and his theory evolved to propose that perhaps the mirror stage was a permanent structure of subjectivity. So I'm proposing something here. It is an odd link, but it is connected to the topic at hand. If, as our organs are connected to each other, our behavior is connected to our vision. Psychogeography refers to a playful approach to drifting around the urban environment. Debord created these weird, wonderful, playful maps that intended to take the pedestrians off the beaten path and subject it to the elements of newness in their very well-known urban environments, whilst experiencing something very different, and their behavior changed. Behavior, according to situationists, is something that is influenced by external situational factors rather than internal traits and motivations. Bearing that in mind, can we ditch our inner narcissist and see things differently if we let ourselves playfully drift off whilst encountering new visual stimuli? A German geologist turned photographer. I'm really fond of him, and I admire him greatly. Wonderful aerial photography of the planet. These works are a little like Rorschach's test and a little Alice in Wonderland. It is a portal for you, as a viewer, to let your imagination guide you whilst viewing a piece. to see the stories that are held within the detail, to make it a part of your own chaotic order. I have created these psychedelic vistas. Do they challenge your imagination? In the words of John Berger, the relation between what we see and what we know is never settled. So ask yourself, what does your visual language say about you? Thank you very much for listening.
Yeah, in a sort of response to Heather's call for expressions, I quite like it to start a conversation after about some of the sort of personal, cultural, ethical approaches, questions, hurdles, ways of dealing in both arts and sciences with things relating to or using sort of human tissue, human parts, body fluids. And I thought I'd share some sort of examples from my previous job, which was full-time forensic scientist specialising in imaging, where we did a lot of work doing training courses for our own scientists, for police, crime scene examiners, and other personnel, where, you know, our sort of day-to-day work often was investigating pretty serious, violent and sexual crimes. And in order to have something which is sort of as close as possible to the crime scene, you want to be able to reconstruct it or do mock crime scenes. And so ideally, you want to reconstruct these, you know, horrible events, but that's obviously not possible. So in some cases, we may have access to, say for example, human bones from archaeology that will last for years and years and can be reused, or would have live victims who can participate by, you know, volunteering to be bruised or have, you know, blood on them, something for sampling for DNA. But there's a huge area of difficulty between using sort of access to dead bodies and dead flesh. For example, you know, when you're studying decomposition of bodies that have been buried over time, or when we're throwing blood around in a mock crime scene to see how the blood's going to bounce on things. And so for those, we often would end up using pigs as surrogates for human body. And so we've you know, I won't show examples, I've got pictures of sort of crime scenes that we used to kind of mock up, where somebody's taken you know, a heavy implement or a sharp instrument to the body of a pig, or use blood spatter, or we bury a pig in the woods or dig it up to see how the, you know, flies have started living on it, etc. And so there's obvious like similarities and differences between what we've done with a pig and what we've done with a human. So blood spatter was one, yeah, dumped bodies, decomposing bodies, bones. And I'm always, just in the conversation previously, I was reminded of, in the gents' toilets, we used to have little vials, and we were encouraged to produce semen samples for use in research. And I always remember having to go to the toilets, having to weigh up whether I was doing the company a favour or what they were going to do with their body fluids if I was to engage in these research and development activities. Or a call came out from one of our female senior scientists who was asking volunteers to participate in an experiment to test the persistence of semen in the oral tract. And so, you know, I was interested in people that sign up for these research projects. What's that? You know, is that go to HR? Does that go somewhere else? Horse blood, we seem to have plenty of for use for the blood banks. Pig skin was used a lot for surrogates. There's a research project that I was working on for a few years. There was a recovery of fingerprints and DNA from the skin of cadavers. So the idea is that once the body has been dead for a little while, there's a change in temperature, there's a change in the skin condition. It's possible to have latent fingerprints that are recovered from the body. If you've got latent fingerprints, it's This project was between Germany, Austria, Denmark, Estonia and the UK, each of which different EU member states, each of which have different ethical approaches and legal approaches to this work. We weren't able to carry out eventually the project like in the UK because of the Human Tissue Act, even taking tiny buccal swab, which is a few skin samples from inside the mouth of a body, was considered to come under the Human Tissue Act as taking human tissue and exporting it to another EU country. So that's what sort of put the dampener on the work in the UK. The other project partners went into looking at their legal framework and whether they could continue, and they did. Without us, I ended up going to Estonia for a week to process local bodies in their military because they didn't have such a sort of strict regulatory framework, and it was just remarkable to see a different approach to sort of scientific experimentation. I mean, largely the problem in the UK is even the bodies that have been donated for medical research, this doesn't come under medical research. Allegedly, the only way that we were going to get access is to speak to families of the deceased in order to get consent. But with the families, that's difficult to arrange, and it's also impossible in terms of the project, in terms of how quickly you want access to matters. Anyhow, as a result of this project, I then volunteered or put this forward as a workshop for a conference in Sydney, thinking I really want to go to this conference, and if I put this forward, maybe they'll sort of pick up and invite me along. And I put a series of workshop projects down, and this was the most difficult one, and it's the one that they're most interested in. Now, I'm a lifelong vegetarian, and I don't get anywhere near meat or abattoirs or what have you. And so I then needed to arrange, from a distance of Oxford to Sydney, can somebody get me some pig skin or some pig flesh in order to do this for a trial and workshop? Not having a clue about the difference in qualities of the pig. So there's a bit of a sort of funny anecdote, really, is that the people in Sydney wanted to get me a load of pig skin. And I was just shocked to see how different it was. Because they got the most hairy, it's like horsehair on this stuff. Terrible hairy pig skin that I then had to try and shave a couple of days before the workshop in order to get down to some, useful skin. And then I ended up sort of going on to the supermarket. And I've got to say, I was very surprised at the low value that was put on these animals. And then sort of strip the skin off of these joints, wrap them around some tin cans, and there's a shave there. So these were supposed to sort of emulate lovely, smooth, shaved arms and thighs and hairy legs, and the sort of thing you might find on a victim. I should say, in preparation for this, the people who were coming onto the workshop were a mix of Australian federal police and Indonesian crime scene people. And from Indonesia, and what's the religious makeup? And dealing with pigs. And is there any issue with handling pig's flesh as opposed to the human flesh, such as just do a quick thing? Are these people okay with the pig flesh? And there we go. And so that's the thing at the end of the day. And it really reminds me, I can't show the image, but it really reminds me of a photo of a scene I saw in the mortuary where we've got body parts in a jar. And another thing that really struck me, going through all of my sort of memory and some of the images that I have, there's always like a sort of trophy shot at the end. So I've got some examples I've seen examples where we've got a group of smiling police people stood around a dead pig, or smiles, or some have got like a human mannequin and it's how it all smiles. And I think it's just bizarre. It reminds me of the kind of the hunt trophy thing. I wonder how these things would be perceived if that was sort of humans there rather than animals. So I could rant for much longer, but I'd really like to have a conversation about sort of professional versus personal. For example, I'm a vegetarian, so I don't really like dealing with the animal parts, but I understand the need for it.
just when I thought I'd got this all under control. I'm not very good at timekeeping, so I've got my presentation pre-timed. So. Good. Okay. Being embodied then. I'm an unusual kind of person in that I'm an artist with an interest in health-related exercise, science, that's my day job, and also an athlete. Generally those three things don't tend to come wrapped up in one person. And my interest is in embodiment, in experiencing the body, and my interest going forward is to have a look at how you can visually, what's the word I'm looking for? Not exactly explain, but how you can show physicality and embodiment through some kind of visual work that you may have created. So that was my back, and this is my hobby, lifting. Any weightlifters in there? No, I didn't. I like to lift. Lifting's my favourite. Any elf fans in the audience? Yes, good. One of the things that we don't do enough of in the West, in Western culture, is we don't do enough physical activity. That's just a given. We've stopped being feudal, we've stopped digging up turnips, we have desk jobs. We don't do anything like enough physical activity to even stay healthy, never mind to improve our fitness, or our strength, or our bone density, or our cardiovascular systems, or our muscular strength and endurance systems, or our flexibility. So whilst we have spent an awful lot of time using our brains, defining ourselves by our brains, defining ourselves and our consciousness by this idea that the brain is carried around in this kind of flesh robot that is called the body. I'm holding Descartes largely responsible for this, but he wasn't the first person to come up with this mind-body split. It's almost a characteristic of Western philosophy and the way that we think about ourselves in the West. And I'm kind of suggesting, and I'm certainly not the only person suggesting this, but I might be the only person suggesting it in this context, that actually what we need to do is re-engage with the body, with the physical self, because consciousness doesn't just come from the brain, consciousness comes from the body as well, and there is a dialogue between the body and the brain which helps to create the self that you are. John Berger, again, you can't get away from that. John Berger with finger puppets though, not many people have got this picture. You're probably familiar with John's axiom, men act, women appear, in terms of looking at the way that women are treated visually is differently from men. So my focus of my work generally, probably because I am identified as female, is on the way that women are presented. And women have a different relationship with their bodies under Western cultural norms than men do, because we are always expected to not just do things, but to look rather lovely while we're doing them. So here I am looking lovely doing something. Possibly not looking lovely doing something. This is a performance that I did called Judith Butler's 50-Minute Shred, in which I was exploring notions of strength building and also improving my femininity. So in between bouts of exercise with kettlebells, I would be applying makeup. So at the end of this, not only was I stronger and more powerful, but obviously very much more feminine. Definitely worked for me. Unfortunately, it's a repetitive process, so you have to keep doing it. What was most interesting for me about the performance, however, was the state that it allowed me to get into in terms of a kind of physical meditation with the body. The work was created by the body and with the body, and that was a kind of important turning point for me, I suppose, in my quest for embodiment. I've looked at it from the point of view of health promotion for the last 15 years. I've worked for YMCA fitness industry training the next generations of gym instructors and personal trainers, but trying to get people to do exercise has become very difficult because we're an increasingly visual culture and people are more concerned about what their body looks like than about what it does. They're more concerned about taking a good selfie than having a good time. And I'm kind of trying to push people in the other direction. So we have a campaign which is supposed to encourage women to re-engage with physical activity. Women, it may surprise you to know, are less physically active than men because of the cultural prescriptions around women in sport. That's an argument for another day. However, in terms of what it's really like to be a physical person, for me this image says it a lot better than sweating like a pig and feeling like a fox. This is somebody thoroughly engaged in a physical activity, creating their own body and creating their own identity through physical work. And that's kind of, we can't do that this evening because we haven't got a big block of clay. I can't do PARQs and medical clearance for all of you in that time. But what I'm inviting you to do this evening is come and sit with me and we'll talk about embodiment, maybe even try and get you in touch with your bodies a little bit, if you would like. If you don't want to, you can go to another table.
First of all, thank you very much for having me tonight. Very pleased to be here. Having met Heather recently at one of my workshops about 2 weeks ago. So I'm going to talk a little bit about biodigital silk and design, and I'm not able to go a lot in depth with it, but I'm going to share a little bit of an insight about my current practice and research, and some notions around the biodigital, that burgeoning domain, and what it offers for designers and what kind of vast array of questions it actually opens up to. So, first let's have a little overview on how biodigital is currently understood. And the term in itself is a joint term because it implies the collision of two separated agents, the biological and the digital. So let's look a little bit into that and see one visualization of Erhard Schön from the 15th century, a German artist, looking at quantification of the body and trying to explain the body through computation, through mathematical imagery. So to kind of get to terms with that computation, measuring the body is not necessarily a new concept, and trying to read what the body entity or biological matter through mathematics is not necessarily something that's so new. However, most recently, we're more faced with the quantifier itself, for example, which might be familiar to some of you, which is this movement from the United States that is actually all about self-tracking and measuring bodily activity. When I saw this image, I really couldn't help myself and kind of made a connection to this very, very old image material. Another German, for some reason, is something that seems to appeal to the German mind quite a lot, to explain the body through machinic terms, and kind of find a machine analogy to explain bodily functions, to visually represent them. So this is Fritz Kahn, who explained functions, invisible functions inside the body through factory analogies. So a bit more recent are digital representations of the body, kind of coming to terms with invisible functions inside the body, trying to provide image material to so far unknown processes inside the body, or to also, it doesn't really work, there's an animation here. Here on that side, for example, we see a 3D virtual corpse that is used for kind of training medical students as an immersive experience, a large-scale holographic immersive experience where people can actually dissect and examine a body, a corpse, without actually having to physically encounter one. So, and then last but not least, we have these sort of cyborg fantasies around augmenting the body, enhancing the body, like very, very strong, gendered women, sort of disfigured, helpless, passive men, highly violent, aggressive, and potent. So then think about another biodigital notion, medical interfacing with the body through digital technology. It's a bit cut off already. Here you can see, for example, pacemakers, glucose monitoring. Think about just kind of slip them in. And so these are actually interfaces that explain or interface with the body through digital terms. So this is actually widely used, found wide acceptance now. First, when it came to the market, has been very, very difficult to kind of find acceptance. Now it's actually part of the new normal. Here we come to something quite a bit more recent from material research. So here we start thinking the body is an interface. That's where it gets interesting. And on the top, you can see, for example, this is a so-called electronic tattoo, which is actually using reverse engineered silk as a material to kind of stick on the skin. And here you can see this like mesh. There's actually an electronic part, it's dissolvable, it can be applied to the skin. This has been done in the laboratory I'm currently working with at University of Boston. On the bottom, you can actually see research study that thinks in a similar line, using the skin as an interface for projection, utilizing the body as an interface. Whereas both notions are actually, well, maybe the top more so than the bottom one, thinking using and deploying the body as an interface rather than actually working hand in hand or emerging from the body to allow for an interface. A big difference. So, the current problem with these notions is actually that digitality that arises from such interfaces with biological material is actually disjointed and disconnected from the material agency of the digital enabler it allows for in the first place. So you have, for example, here these digital devices, and they read from the biological body, but they are restricted in their functions. They can only read what the device is actually capable of. There's a certain limit to what the device can, what kind of data set it can actually provide. So the image material and the knowledge it conveys to the user, to the patient, is as such slightly falsified or even entirely interpreted by designers. So one needs to be careful about that, because the knowledge provider is the digital device and the interface designer. It's not necessarily providing ultimate truth. That's exactly coming at now. So I'm interested in biological interfaces that work with transients, with transition, with biological materials. So I am working with this laboratory I mentioned before, Silk Lab in Boston. So far, before I actually researched into silk, I was the first time around like 2010. This was basically my knowledge on silk and classical applications. So you see here, silk and cocoon are reeling, and a silk weaving machine, manufacturing wonderful, glossy and expensive textiles, often used for beautiful and luxurious gowns. That was my knowledge so far. But what fascinated me about it is that the material is the history of the materials. More than 5,000 years old, the silkworm is domesticated by humans for that time span. So you have a very interesting human-animal collaboration, or others may say exploitation, that is very resilient and is still practiced, like just back in the days. But in the last couple of decades, it became of interest in material science for doing quite different things. So here we can actually see that was like, these photos were taken out in 2012 when I did my first visit to Silk Lab. Here you can see different aggregation states of the material. On the top right, you can see the silk cocoon. This is actually what the silkworm produces. Then it's liquefied, and here in the middle you can see this liquid state of silk, as if it would be in the silkworm's body. It's not entirely the same, it's the recombinant silk, but it comes quite close in terms of material properties. And what you can do from this is you can do silken sheets, you can do tissue body. Its biodegradability is programmed. It will not be rejected by human tissue, and all of that altogether is actually essentially building a digital gateway into the human body. So this is where it's really interesting, because digital interfacing is now not necessarily coming through enabled or facilitated through the digital device, it's actually emerging from the biological material. So here you can see a quick overview of the processing. It's very simplified. Basically, I was very surprised about how easy and how simple it is actually to achieve once you've learned the procedure. So here you can see the mulberry leaves. This is basically what the silkworm feasts on, and just that. Here on the top you can see the silkworms themselves, basically caterpillars, not worms. Then they would make these cocoons, where they would just weave themselves in order to start with metamorphosis, to essentially become a silk moth, which we don't want them to be, because it would damage the silk. Before that happens, the silkworm cocoon will be actually boiled and cooked in order to key off the pupae, so it cannot complete the procedure. And what happens then is the silkworm cocoons get cut into pieces, liquefied, dialyzed, and then here in the end you can see wonderful transparent sheet material. So what we're actually aiming for here is basically moving towards this interfacing with the body. And what I mean, it really opens up to a vast array of questions about ethical nature. How do you actually work as a designer within that field? Is it ethical to design for transients? Is it ethical to actually obfuscate the activities to create an even more so invasive, invisible design? So this is basically the procedure cut short. Silkworms, usually the sort of process, either textile processing or letting the silkworm emerge, which we don't want. And this is where we kind of like divert the classic route by introducing human agency. And that's where it becomes interesting for the designer, because working in this field requires full understanding of the procedure, full understanding of the material, get a really circular understanding of the whole process it entails. Oh, this is a bit blurry, but I hope you get the point. There's a drawing I made. So you can see here the entire processing cycle, and then a range of different application states you can achieve from that. You really produce silk as a platform from where you can act, and almost from that starting point, a sort of circular chain that starts in the laboratory that enables a range of almost different lifestyles, if you want. So here you have like fibers, films, tubes, or arteries, for example, silk microfields, silk gels, sponges, aerogels. Is really interesting. So my first exploration on ingrown silk was a project called biophilia open grafting and biophilia sabala tissue. I don't show it here, it's on my website though when you're interested. That was the first sort of dive into different forms of living with silk, silk and centricity, different ethical dilemmas it might bring alongside with it. But we're focusing more on the sort of practical applications for time constraints. So there's a range of interesting functions that material provides, so you can rethink drug delivery, because you can program the material to dissolve on time in your body as you wish, when you wish, and each body part you want to sort of address a very sort of elegant and customized and personalized way of delivering medicine. You have implant devices that would work around organs, for example. During surgery procedures, a range of interesting functions provided. Then disease models you could test, and implant devices we have to do again, tissue engineering, arteries, and exchanging body parts really, essentially. So, kind of thinking about really, we have this application of silk that basically will be soon applied in IT, for customer electronics, but also interface with the body. You basically start to connect the body to a huge system that basically goes beyond its own borders. And I've said that before, how do you actually design for transients, for invisibility? How do you possibly maneuver around as a designer with this? In a way, you have to work with scientists, and a lot of art science engagement has happened before, and all of that holds great virtue, great value. On the other hand, this is a scale that will potentially become quite industrial, quite big, and it might affect us in ways we haven't been foreseen yet. So as part of my research, I'm trying to start with little baby steps and think of ways how I can engage meaningfully with scientists in the laboratory, but then also involve non-scientists but experts in their own field to really have anchor points for critical engagement, to provide them with a platform that they can contribute a cultural viewpoint to science. And I'm mediating and facilitating that at the moment. So, because it's very difficult due to IP restrictions to actually enter the laboratory in the way that I do. But I would like to open this up, because I think even in conversations with scientists that came out, they said I feel overwhelmed with the responsibility. So I think it's quite nice that I have the chance to really work with them, and I've started this workshop series, which I called Living Assemblies, quite suitably thinking along the line of the body as an interchangeable, exchangeable unit. And we'll think about designing your silken self. And the first workshop was fairly small, and it started at a conference last year at Greenwich University. And then the second teaching module emerged from Zurich University of the Arts. It was an entire weekend. It was a transdisciplinary module. A lot of students came along from music, theatre, from interaction design, and were very interested in understanding how to design differently with biomaterials. Just recently, 2 weeks ago, there was this third workshop, Living Assemblies Designers. In London, was premiered in London, so I'm very pleased to have an amazing bunch of people together. And here we actively design scenarios, map them together, and really trying to analyze and come to terms with a sort of hybridity that this material provides. And to really think about silk more as an exploration medium that really allows for sort of conceptual crystallization, thinking about the material qualities in which silk is polyhedral. It's multifaceted. It allows for so many applications and for so many different ways of working with it that I also felt like the exploration, designing the exploration, is to respond to that. So how can you design a critical platform that allows for multiplicity of voices, that really collides different viewpoints and negative aspects and dystopian views around this technology, bring that back to the scientists so they can actually really think critically also about their practice, which I really would like to do. So to finally stop here, this is basically a project website which is not there yet. It's called Polyphonic Futures, the project I'm currently working on. There's nothing there yet, but it will be very soon in a couple of months. My personal website, you can find it also on Twitter, Polyfutures, and I would very much like to involve any of you interested, and I look forward to talk to you.
Each of the hosts, Christina from the British Science Association, is going to host a conversation Jerry Overall to talk about environmental responsibility. You can join Béa Kayani to talk about vision, perception and ambiguity. You can join John Smith to talk about the ethics and cultural implications of working with dead stuff. You can join Dillon-Parkin to talk about, or to embody, to become a bit more embodied or connected, so that your body isn't just the thing that carries your head between lessons and meetings. Or you can join Veronica Ranner to talk about the biodigital interface and how she's working with silk and applications.
In Germany, Thailand, like all around, wherever.
Something which you're trying to identify and look at, something you've seen before.
It's very natural and very organic. I mean, for 7 years I've wondered. What part? What part? It's a perception. In the Financial Times, actually. Yeah.
Oh, yes. You're taking that lady, aren't you?
Yes, I am.
Sort of taking line from previous conference.
We infused them, so we got very fresh pea cards from them.
Yeah, that might be to be in disguise. Because I couldn't touch around my glasses in the house, so and also this the annoying reflections that
Roll in there to really snap.
Okay.
Once this tissue is fully formed and muscular, that's the inspiration, that's the sensation. Yeah, and it starts to absorb that material. That's the nature of personalized this. Thank you very much. It's very well. What's available. So you create a lot of very strange situations.
Well, one was
challenges.
It has been really wonderful meeting with all of you and discussing ideas and also finding that other people are interested in the same things as I've been interested in.
Okay,
Thank you so much.
Thank you for coming. I'm going to pass over to John. Are there any highlights from your conversations about the ethics and cultural implications of working with things like?
Well, we went off in different tangents, really.
Really? That surprised me.
Robbie, strangely enough, got us talking about taxidermy and tattooing on pigs. That led me into some interesting places.
Okay, anything else you want to add?
Well, various things. No. Various things to help.
Thank you, John.
Thank you.
Jerry, any highlights or things that you take away from your conversation?
There's quite a lot around the private sphere and public sphere, so how sort of what we would do in private, and then once we get out to the public, we're sort of not really as responsible as we'd like to be, and then lots of machinations around capitalism being a big problem, but how do we manage change? So yeah, more questions than answers, but yeah, maybe just talking about baby steps, using language and vocabulary to sort of ratchet up change, and maybe, I think we need a war. So,
need a war, okay. We need a war or a revolution to agenda change. And then, Clara, did you manage to embody everybody?
we talked about it, we talked about it. We've been entertained by the fact that it's been mostly women, especially in time wanting to embody it, so we're assuming the men are fine. So that's cool to go with that, guys, that's great. Yeah, we've been pretty well tonight, largely. We are concerned about the emphasis on the body image as opposed to body inhabitants, is that a word? And we're pushing yoga. So kind of the classic way of integrating mind and body in just for sure. To know yourself.
Can you combine war and yoga? Is that something?
I'd like to try.
And embodiment.
I'd like to try.
War of yoga.
Yes.
fight with you.
Manifestation.
Yes.
Veronica, is there anything you would like to share from your conversations and your wonderful specificity? If anybody hasn't seen just a live silkworm, come say hello with you.
It's been interesting how we went from the sheer material observation right into using these affordance and talking about the difference between hybridity and quasi objects. So it was quite interesting how that quickly jumped from material capacity into cultural and philosophical discussion. So I think that's quite telling.
Well, thank you. And do continue the conversations. We will wrap up this evening. This is, as I said, this is the first time we've done this kind of format where we do the presentations and then the conversations happening simultaneously. I will be sending a little link to a very short survey monkey to ask you what you thought of tonight. So please do spend a couple of minutes filling it in. If it's something that's kind of popular, if you felt you had more opportunity to ask questions and to engage in discussion and the kind of whole room Q&A that we usually do, please let us know. We want to try different formats and different ways of engaging with many diverse issues of where art and science and technology meet and the intersections of those practices. So we carry on the conversations for a few minutes and have another drink if you want, otherwise I shall close it for this academic year and we'll start with Montenegro again in October. And you will no doubt hear about it in due course. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Heather.